We're going to continue with Hello Universe. This is chapter 18. When we left off, Chet had thrown Virgil's backpack down an old well, and Gulliver is in the backpack. So Virgil decides there's a ladder also inside the well. So Virgil decides he's got to climb down to rescue Gulliver, except for the ladder doesn't go all the way down, and he had to kind of let go and drop the rest of the way in, and he broke his cell phone, fell out of his pocket, and it broke. And the last rung of the ladder is too far up for him to reach. But Gulliver is okay. So, chapter 18, Animal. Chet was now convinced that Davies had lied about the snakeskin. He hadn't found the first bit of evidence that there were any snakes in the woods. Then again, he wasn't exactly sure what kind of evidence snakes leave behind besides snakeskin. But nonetheless, if he hadn't found any, he'd even broken off a branch so he could root around. He used the branch to push aside clusters of fallen twigs and small branches of leaves to see if a snake was hiding underneath. Fangs at the ready. And he wasn't even scared either, because he was no chicken. The noises in the woods were fairly standard. The occasional tweet of some stupid bird, the faraway sound of a car driving down a road in the neighborhood, the sound of Chet's sneakers hitting the ground. But during a particularly detailed search at the base of an ash tree, while Chet diligently poked at the ground with his branch, he heard something different. It sounded like someone moving stealthily through the trees, someone or something. He half expected to come face to face with a grizzly bear, but then he realized how ridiculous that was. He reminded himself that he was no chicken, even though his heart was pounding. Then when he didn't see anything, he stood up straighter and turned all the way around to give the area a proper survey. He listened. He heard it again, now from another direction. The movement. He shifted too, quickly, so quickly that he may have made a lot of noise. Shh, he said to himself. He raised the branch, prepared to use it as a weapon. Who's there? He said, but his voice was so quiet and whispery that he wasn't sure anyone could have heard it. Then it dawned on him. It was probably that idiot boy with his backpack, the skinny kid who never talked. The Chinese or whatever he was kid. He was probably trying to make his way back home and wanted to stay out of sight, which made perfect sense. All things considered, let's face it, that kid was no match for Chet Bullens. Chet confidently returned. It bloomed through his body until his shoulder relaxed and his chest puffed out. Oh, his confidence returned. Hey, Dumbo, he said, is that you? Sneaking off to the bookstore? Chet laughed like this was the funniest thing he'd said all day. He often thought he would make a good comedian, that with all his funny jokes. Chet waited. His eyes moved slowly from tree to tree. The thought of someone being so afraid that he had to sneak by, Chet felt like a warlord or a warrior. Sometimes before he went to bed at night, he even imagined himself that way, like it was the Middle Ages and he was an all-powerful knight sitting atop a mighty horse, covered in armor and pointing at people with his fine-tipped sword. Go fetch me water, you peasant, he'd say in his imaging. But there were no peasants here. So there he was stuck with names like Dumbo. He would work better if the kid had big ears, but it still worked. It would work better if the kid had big ears, but it still worked. Oh, Dumbo. You can run, but you can't hide, yelled Chet. It wasn't very original, but it was all he could come up with on short notice. There was another bustle, but no boy. Chet turned the other way and thought he heard something again, but this time from the opposite direction, so he pivoted full circle. That's when he saw her. Valencia, Somerset. Chet dropped the branch and moved closer to the tree. He told himself that he wanted to spy on her, but really he was hiding. The way she had glared at him at the Super Saver gave him the creeps. And now here she was in the woods, holding something, a bowl. She hadn't seen him, that was clear. She was focused on something else. Her eyes were narrow with concentration, like she was picking apart each leaf. She walked slowly, carefully, like she didn't want to disturb anything. And all the while she held the bowl with both hands. It was obvious she was looking for an animal. Or maybe not an animal, maybe a creature. Chet moved farther behind the tree so she wouldn't see him. What if she was out here doing some kind of ritual sacrifice? He remembered the blazing, angry look in her eyes. Something wasn't right with that girl's head, and it wasn't just her ears. She crouched, peering through the trees, then stood and peered some more. What was in the bowl? Maybe it was a human finger, or 12 chicken feet. Perhaps she'd cut the ears off rabbits, and she wanted to feed them to some secret Bigfoot-like beast that lived in the forest. She was evil, clearly. There was something strange about a girl who couldn't hear. Unless she really was lying about it. Chet mustered up the courage to make a noise that sounded like it could be an animal. He clicked his tongue. He hooted like an owl, quietly at first, then louder. Valencia didn't react. He hooted again, louder still, but she just kept walking deliberately with her bowl. A few logical explanations crossed Chet's mind. Maybe she was taking care of stray cats, only he hadn't seen a single one out here. There were only squirrels, and who would bring a bowl into the woods to feed squirrels? Clearly, she was up to no good. That was chapter 18.